Good morning, everybody. Brett exaggerates. I was done by 8 o'clock this morning. It's a world record for me. Did everybody get to see Ronan Ryan yesterday? He was great, wasn't he? In recognition of Ronan's appearance here, the AV team has requested that I swear my entire way through my presentation this morning. Thank you. I would do it, except that I only really learned how to swear yesterday when I was watching him. So moving on, it's great to see you all here. I know that all of you heard a lot of really great presentations. There was a lot of content throughout yesterday. And I think what you're starting to realize is at 451, we remain very bullish about the hosting and cloud market. This is an unprecedented era for, I think, our generation of IT professionals. When I look back over the last 15 years that I've spent in IT, we are most definitely entering an era where there's going to be more change than we've ever seen before, whether it's through the number of users or the number of devices or the number of applications that we're seeing coming to market. And what's going to be most exciting about this is as we enter into this new era, we're going to see different expectations in the hosting and cloud marketplace, and we're already starting to see that. I think for those of you that saw Marco Lamena from Microsoft yesterday present, I think we're even starting to see Microsoft as an organization change their messaging and change what they bring to market. And what we were able to do with Microsoft through the last year, we did some very extensive end-user research. We did a large study of 2,000 hosting customers across 11 countries, and a lot of that research is going to be presented here to you this morning. So in terms of how we see the market changing, I talked about how IT is really entering into this new era. And if you go back and you look at how IT really got started, it was really around business applications and driving more productivity throughout the organization. So thinking about back office operations and finance and HR, for example. And then we pretty much went through what I would describe as the B2B era of IT, where businesses were interacting with other businesses and doing transactions across the different organizations. And now where we are today is what I think of as the consumer era of IT. Businesses connecting directly to their end customers or the consumer, and then consumers talking to other consumers. So think about things like Facebook, and think about things like Twitter and LinkedIn. It really is about empowering the era of the consumer. And then, of course, where we're going is around things. So start to think about consumers interacting with things, and then ultimately the things-to-things market. So think about wearables, for example, glasses, fitness bracelets, smartwatches, and then start to think about all of those senses that are part of that world of things interacting with each other without any human interaction. And what you start to see is we have this very large and increasing sphere of compute and storage and networking that continues to evolve. And what we also know is that the gravity of this world starts to move to the edge and not the core where we've been with business applications. And with this market, what we also know is that there's going to be an amazing amount of change that happens with IT services. And what we also know is that your traditional IT department today has to change because of the way the business model is changing in this market. So one of the examples I like to talk about today is Uber. Did any of you take Uber from the airport to the hotel on your trip here? There's got to be somebody that took Uber. Well, maybe you didn't, because I don't think Las Vegas allows Uber here. So what's interesting about Uber is Uber has so far received $1.2 billion in funding. It's an amazing amount of funding. And the company is now valued at about $17 billion. So think about Uber. They don't own taxis. They don't hire drivers. What they are essentially is a platform for consumers to be able to deal with businesses. It's basically a compute infrastructure. It's valued at $17 billion. This is the type of innovation that we're seeing in the market that really relates back to this new consumer era. And as you start to think about the Internet of Things and consumers with things, think about the Uber example, where it's really mobile devices connecting into essentially a large platform for business. So what's interesting in the market is where we've been. And when you think about all of these new organizations coming to market, like the Ubers of the world, and like the Googles, and the Facebooks, and the Twitters, how is it that they're able to come into this market and infiltrate what had really been a pretty steady state market for many, many years? One of the most important things that's been happening in the market is that capital, the cost of capital, is at an all-time low, meaning that the cost of borrowing is low. And what that has enabled companies to do, companies that don't have a legacy business and haven't got a large portfolio of assets, are able to come in and attack using very consolidated products and to be able to really compete against these larger vendors. And of course, what we know is that when the cost of capital is at an all-time low, that you are going to get companies that are willing to come in, willing to spend money, and willing to invest and disrupt a lot of the incumbent companies that we're seeing today. What we also know is that a lot of executives in the IT market today, if you think about the last 10 years, have built their careers on cost cutting, right? So think about the most successful technologies going back over the last 10 years. Virtualization and consolidation has been the mainstay of a lot of CIOs' agenda. And they really became the heroes, right? There was a lot of IT executives that really built their brand and built their own reputation on being able to take out operational cost. And I feel like what has happened in that period is we've lost the ability to think about innovating. And we really haven't raised a generation of IT executives that know how to drive the top line of the business. They really know how to cut costs on the bottom line. And that's a very dangerous place to be right now when you see all the innovation that's taking place in the IT market, when you see all of these new companies coming along, getting funding, attacking the incumbent competitors, and winning and succeeding. So what we know is that we've got a generation of IT professionals that may or may not know how to innovate, and they certainly don't like to take on a lot of risk, right? We see people that are very, very cautious still with their IT investments. So one of the things we think about as you look across on the left-hand side of the screen is where the IT project portfolio is today. And we know that a lot of it is very much weighted towards maintenance and IT cost-cutting exercises. Where we think the portfolio really should be is what's in the middle, and it should be a much more balanced portfolio around growth, meaning driving top-line growth of the business, as well as ongoing maintenance and consolidation projects. So when we did the study with Microsoft this year, we asked the hosting customers that were part of that study what their IT project portfolio looked like, and this was really interesting to me. This is actual data out of the study. This is what their IT project portfolio looks like. It's a really nice, balanced view of growth projects as well as maintenance and consolidation projects. So this is really what you want to see, and what this tells us is that as customers go to hosting and cloud, they're not doing it to cut costs. I think one of the bad raps that cloud gets is that it's this inexpensive way to drive compute and to cut out costs. This is very much not what the market is today. What the market is today is an opportunity for businesses to reinvent themselves and to really start to think about growing their business, not cutting costs in their business. Very, very important point. What we also know when we did the study back in 2013, we asked the customers if they would allocate 100 points across 5 goals for their company: increasing revenue, lowering costs, improving quality, speeding time to market, and lowering risk. And what we saw from year to year was there was actually a decline in the need to lower costs, and what we saw was an increase in speeding time to market and lowering risk. And it was pretty consistent across all different sizes of companies and geographies for that matter. And again, what this tells us is that there's a lot of fatigue in the market around cutting costs, and that we really see companies wanting to innovate and wanting to grow again. And what's going to be important here is that we think about things like this as the market goes forward. So why do we have an IT executive that's really looking for growing their business without introducing a lot of risk? And it's because we're living in the target era. So just to give you a quick summary of the target breaches, it happened at their point of sale system. 70 million users were affected by the target breach. That's about 25% of the US population. And it happened at the absolute worst possible time for Target. It happened as they were going into the Christmas holiday period, and it has affected them throughout all of this year. There was about $61 million in direct expenses that they had to pay out as a result of that. But really what the issue was for them is that it affected that holiday period, which is most of their sales for the year. And what it did was that it meant that throughout the rest of the year that they were always behind. It was a huge impact to their business. And you know, Target's a great brand, right? That is a great American brand. It stands for a lot of things for different buyers here in the US. And what it really did was it impacted their brand. It impacted the way that their customers perceived them. It impacted what they thought around security. And what was most disturbing about that breach is it really wasn't a security issue with one of their employees or even one of their systems. It was a contractor's email was hacked and there was a password in that email. So it was really something really outside what you would even think of as a security issue. And what we of course also know is this is ongoing. And we've seen this with JP Chase and as well as Home Depot. And I think we just have to accept that we're living in this era where there are going to be breaches and attacks. There's estimates of upwards of 200 or so of these types of breaches that are taking place every year. What's different about Home Depot is the way they reacted to it. They jumped on it very quickly. I was actually at an event where the Home Depot CFO spoke the morning after the breaches were announced, and the first thing she said was, "I am so sorry this happened." They completely owned up to it, they stood up, they took it, and they handled it very, very well. With JP Morgan, what's interesting there is it wasn't a breach of their credit card system, it was actually a breach of their websites. Right? This is a financial institution. So this is the era that we're operating in. So it tells you a little bit about why there is so much friction and contention between thinking about cloud and hosting, and then starting to think about what that means for innovating the business, and then starting to think about what kind of risk that opens a lot of IT organizations up to. And one other thing that's, I think, really interesting from the study that we did was we asked the hosting customers who the end users were of the applications that they were deploying with their hosting environment. And we looked at it across 4 different areas. If they were using a traditional dedicated model with a hoster, if they were doing hosted private cloud, meaning that the customer had their own dedicated hardware in a cloud environment, public cloud or SaaS. And what you can see as we go from left to right is that the type of user, as customers go out and use more public cloud offerings, actually lends itself towards the consumer. So it's moving away from servicing applications for the employees of the company and much more about touch to the ultimate end customer. So that tells us something very, very important as well. What that tells us is, and what we know from history, is that when IT organizations are servicing their customers, they'll want to spend more there. Right? We know that. We know that we don't see a lot of IT organizations investing in the best employee app, right? How many of you out there think that your own internal employee apps are the greatest thing, right? The investment is always going to be with the clients. And so what we know now is that IT organizations have spent many, many years solidifying what they think of as a robust environment. And when they go out to cloud, they're going to expect that what they get from their cloud and hosting providers is going to match what they've built up internally. So what we also know is where the dollars are being spent. So we asked these hosting customers how much they're spending on-prem, how much they're spending off-prem, how we think that's going to change over 2 years, and then we look at the different on-prem and off-prem options where they're investing. So about 41% of the spend for these customers was on-prem. This is a biased sample because it's hosting customers. When we look at the mass market, it's much more like 70-30, 80-20, more spent on-prem today. But when we look at what they're doing on-prem, what we saw increase year over year was an increase in virtualization tactics, which was surprising. The year before, we'd seen a pretty dramatic increase in private cloud on-prem. What we do know is where customers are today with their own on-prem private cloud activities has already far exceeded what we saw from customers 2 years ago. So there has been a lot of investment there. What we think is taking place is there's a second wave of virtualization so that customers can move more of their applications to the cloud and get them on that virtualized platform. In terms of off-premise deployment, we see some mix in infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and even platforms as a service. We saw some increasing in outsourcing, particularly in region, more in some of the Asia regions. But there's a sort of limited mix there. What we saw on the infrastructure as a service side, though, is something that was really telling to me. And that is that their growth in the hosting market is not necessarily going to be around public cloud, which I think all of us had assumed for a long time. The growth is actually going to be in hosted private cloud. So again, what is hosted private cloud? That is infrastructure with a hoster that's wrapped up in a cloud environment. So it's using all the automation and orchestration tools that you would expect to see from a public cloud provider, but it's with a hosting company, and the infrastructure is dedicated to that particular organization. So what we do know is that the growth for customers when they think about hosting and cloud today is very much going to be in a private environment. And it makes sense, right? We're living in the target era. We're living in the era where companies like to innovate without risk. And what private cloud offers is a lowering of the risk while still being able to exploit the benefits of moving to the cloud. And when we look at what customers are doing with their different cloud environments, whether it's their on-prem private cloud or their off-prem cloud initiatives, what we know for certain is that everybody wants that hybrid model. So half of the customers that we talked to in this study said that they were doing some form of hybrid cloud, meaning that their cloud environments that were on-prem or their cloud environments that were off-prem were interoperable with each other, meaning that they can move data and applications from one environment to the next. And of course, we know that's going to be a very important part of cloud. It gives companies a lot of flexibility in terms of where they can think about their workloads running. If they need bursting capability, that's available to them. But what we also saw that was very interesting was that the dominant model today is on-prem private cloud with a hosted private cloud. So going from private to private. So again, I think that there's a lot of assumptions that clients and customers will want to move their workloads to the public cloud. And so far there is very good activity there, but what everybody's really looking for right now is private to private. And the hoster sits right in the middle of that. So what we tend to see is that customers are looking at the hosters as the trusted advisor for the cloud. And you think about your own businesses, a lot of your customers, you probably have very deep and long relationships with them. They're coming to you because they want advice and because they trust you, right? When you go to the public cloud model, it's a lot lower touch than what we're seeing with the hosted model today. And companies are really not interested in that because they're very uncertain about what decisions they should be making, and they are looking for advice here. So in terms of what's been an inhibitor to the cloud today, I don't think it's a mystery that everybody talks about security being the #1 inhibitor to the cloud, and we continue to see that. I would say it another way. Security is the biggest opportunity with the cloud today. The company that solves the cloud security problem is going to make billions and billions of dollars. And in terms of what customers are looking for there, what they really want is transparency. So the public cloud market has really operated under an air of mystery, right? Nobody's really sure about the cloud, right? There's that famous quote in the movie, once it goes to the cloud, nobody understands the cloud. And that very much it has been the sentiment of the cloud market. What customers are telling us is we're not going to do that. We're going to set in place a 3-year plan. Our CIO has told us to get a cloud strategy together, but we're not going to do it under an air of mystery. Everything absolutely needs to be transparent to us. And what do they mean by that? The environment needs to be able to be audited. They need to understand where the liability lives. Encryption needs to be determined. You need to understand where the data is, the security around data in motion as well as data at rest. There are a number of areas that customers are looking for here, and frankly, it looks almost like what they're doing in their own environment, right? So they're going to expect what they've had all along on their own environment with the cloud. So the providers that we see succeeding here are those that are opening up the doors. And frankly, if you're a provider and you feel that you're able to offer good advice to customers as they move to cloud and you're able to be transparent with your environment, you should be talking about that all the time because that is a differentiator right now. What we also know is that about 3/4 of all the customers said that any cloud initiative that they have has to be run through their IT security team, and it will go through an audit. So you absolutely have to be transparent with your customers, and those security teams are going to come in and they're going to expect you to be able to fulfill on a lot of different questionnaires and to be able to understand, again, where the liability lives and where the risk is. And what we also know, which is different from last year, is that customers are willing to pay for that now. So previously, it had been assumed either that customers were willing to give up security or that they had expected that their provider was going to give them the security built in as part of their offerings. And what we know now is that customers don't expect that and that they are willing to pay for cloud security. About 80% of the clients that we talked to, 85% of the customers that we talked to said that they would pay for security services. And when we asked them how much they would pay, they said it was anywhere from 25 to 30%, depending on the different environments that they're in. Now, that's a very similar premium to what customers have been paying for years around managed services. What does it tell us? It tells us there's a massive opportunity for hosting providers and service providers to make money on security as they go forward, because it is going to be the differentiator for a lot of the providers that we see in the market today. And in terms of what we think providers should be looking at here. We have a security analyst that pointed out to me that hosting really got going when a lot of the providers opened up the knock, right? They let everybody in, they let everybody see what their environment looked like, they let everybody see what the management of that environment was like. That's really when hosting started to become real. So we think that if you're a provider in the market today, what you've got to do is open up the SOC, the Security Operations Center, and let your clients in and let them see what it is that you have to offer, because you may have an environment that's actually better than what they have on premise. But it's going to be something that's absolutely necessary, and they at least need to know that you're running repeatable practices. And what we also think is going to be important is third-party certification. Right? So just as in any other market, you want to have somebody put that stamp of guarantee on you. So whether it's certifications from TrustWave, things like HIPAA, PCI, whatever it may be, it's going to be really important for you as a vendor to make sure that you have these stamps of approval. And then you should offer an advanced portfolio of services around security. Again, this is going to be the differentiator going forward. People are looking for advice. They're looking to you as the trusted advisor. You very much should be putting in a business around this because we know there's money to spend there. And then you've got to be really, really clear about what's part of the basic program and what's part of the premium program. So things like intrusion detection, that should be part of your basic protection. Things like SIM and log and event management, that is absolutely a premium product that you should be charging for. And then you have to be really, really clear about things like encryption. Who is doing the encryption? Does it live with the customer? It probably should live with the customer. So these are things that, again, I think that we take for granted, and you probably think of it as just good best practices with your own business, but these are things that the customers are looking for as they move forward and make decisions around the providers that they're moving forward with. And remember, these are going to be 2- and 3-year decisions that they're making right now. I hear everywhere I go, we've got to pull our 3-year plan together for cloud. So the decisions customers are making today, they're going to be living with for the next 2 to 3 years. So it's really important for you as a supplier in this market to tune your messaging to this, because this is what they're looking for. And then also, one other thing to think about, don't be confused about security versus privacy. So this is the Google Transparency Report that was published at the end of last year. And what's interesting here is the growth in the number of government requests to Google on customer accounts that they have. So not only are the number of requests growing dramatically, they've more than doubled over the last 4 years, but what you're also seeing is that international governments are very much part of the requests that they're making on customer accounts. And I think the US gets a bad rap for being very much imposing on the privacy of their customers. I can tell you, or their citizens, I can tell you that it's very much happening internationally as well, and particularly in European governments. But this is privacy. That's a whole separate issue from what I was just talking about, security. And then finally, I think one of the other things that's going to be interesting about cloud, again, I think that one of the hypes around cloud was that it's low touch, right? You go out to the cloud just takes care of everything. I can tell you cloud is very much not going to be about low touch. It's actually going to be about high touch. When we ask customers across their different environments, whether it was a traditional hosted model all the way through to a SaaS or public cloud model, what type of customer support they were looking for, people still want somebody to pick up the phone and send them an email. Right? This is not an era of necessarily going to the community forum to get all of your answers. For an application development community, that's a really great method of communicating. The only place where we see that doing very well is with public cloud. Everybody else wants someone to pick up the phone and communicate with them. It's really important. If you're going to be down, you need somebody to tell you when you're going to be back up again. You need to know in what order you're going to come back up again. And we also know that customers are still willing to pay a premium for that. Again, the premiums are 25 to 30%. So security is the differentiator, and customer service is still very much the differentiator in cloud. Something else that I think you want to keep in mind is, as we go forward here, again, this is the study of the 2,000 hosting customers that we did throughout the year. 45% of those customers said that they were already beyond running projects and trials and discovery and evaluation. Right? So 45% of the customers said that they were running production-level applications as part of a cloud or hosting environment. And what we also know is that as customers' maturity changes, as they move up the stack and get more experience with their cloud, with a cloud provider. What we also know is that they move away from thinking about having to connect to the public cloud. And what they really want to do, and what we're already seeing with that small number of companies that are doing broad implementations with cloud, is they're moving from on-prem to a hosted private cloud, and then hosted private clouds to the public cloud. Those were the two dominant hybrid models for them. So what lives in the middle there is the hoster, right? We saw the customers that really wanted to go to the public cloud are those with less experience. So again, I think there's this perception in the market that when you think about hybrid cloud models, it's really about connecting out to the public cloud. And what we're seeing with the most mature customers and those with the most experience, they've decided that the hoster lives in the middle of that and that they will be very much determining a lot of the policies and the security settings and the SLAs for them. So the end game isn't public cloud. The end game is actually hybrid cloud. And this is something that you really can bet on for the next 5 years. It's really hard to say what the market will look like 10 or 20 years from now, but what we do know about customers today is that they're going to continue to have on-prem operations. They do want to interoperate with some of their cloud and hosting solutions, and that the end game for them is not one environment. The end game is really to be able to move their applications and data between multiple environments. So the end game is hybrid. So just a couple of other things to think about as we think about cloud. Again, I can't underscore this enough, particularly as you think about your clients and going out in your marketing message. Cloud today is really not about cost cutting. Cloud today is about driving new business models. It's about increasing business service. It's about helping your customers grow their business. It's about scaling to demand. It's about a lot of things other than just being an inexpensive environment. Cost is always an issue, right? Cost is always the #1 issue in any IT investment, and cloud is no different. But what's really different in the market right now, and as customers go forward, is cloud is going to be about changing their business and being able to innovate without risk. And if you keep that in mind, you can really think about how that's going to impact cloud investments for the next 5 years. Something else that's really interesting from the study is how the average revenue per user changes in cloud and hosting environments as you look at different size companies. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we've got very small organizations with 10 to 50 employees. Looking all the way through the top of the pyramid, large organizations with more than 500 employees. And of course, what we know is that the market of small business is massive, right? There's more than 10 million small businesses across the globe. 3 million companies across the globe with 50 to 250 employees, and then about 600,000 or so companies with more than 250 employees. And what you see is a doubling almost of the average spend per month of those organizations as they move from one customer segment to the next. So if you're a provider, you're like, hey, I want to get to the top of the pyramid, that $22,000 per month looks really good to me. Well, you've got to be really careful as you think about that. So as you think about servicing the large organization, it means a lot of different investments. It means you probably need a direct sales channel. It means you're going to need multi-language. It means you're going to need a large customer support center. It means that you're going to have to absolutely have your story straight around security. You're going to need a very large set of multi-language customer support centers. So what we know about this market is you're going to have to pick your poison here. So if today you're really servicing the mid-tier, you've got to really decide if you want to move up that stack and move up the pyramid and thinking about moving to higher value customers, you're going to have to think about the investments you're going to need on the business side to be able to get there. It's not for the faint of heart, and you're going to need to be really, really careful and think about different segments and how different customer segments and how different types of customers are going to want to buy and invest in cloud going forward. And you're going to have to be very, very clear about that as you move into this market. There's a massive market at the bottom of that pyramid, right? So the average revenue per user might be much lower, but look at the number of organizations there, 10 million across the globe. It's a huge TAM for customers to think about moving to cloud and hosting. And this is why we continue to be very bullish about the entire market, because we know customers are just getting started here. So when we look at our forecast, this is our forecast through 2016. There's a number of things on this chart that are really important. The green area is public cloud, so infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and then infrastructure software as a service. That market is growing very, very quickly. It's going to has a CAGR of about 52% over the time period. The largest part of the market, however, remains in managed services. So again, Cloud is very much about high touch. It's not about low touch. And we know there's a lot of money to be made on premium services with cloud providers. What we also know is that the market over the last 5 years has essentially more than doubled. And today in 2014, we're at about $56 billion. Just to give you some context for the size of that market, that's the same size as the server hardware market annually. So the amount of money that customers are spending on servers on an annual basis now matches what they're spending on services around infrastructure on an annual basis. There's a lot of money to be made in the cloud marketplace. And then what we also add in here sometimes is what's in the gray bar. That's the multi-tenant data center market. That's the colo market. So when you think about this entire market and you put all of it together, by 2016, we think the market's going to be over $100 billion. And what's also interesting about this slide is that all boats rise in this market, right? So as customers invest more in off-premise solutions, colo providers, data center providers, everybody wins as part of this market, as a lot of these providers invest in new data center properties. So just to wrap it up, the opportunity for cloud absolutely is serious. We are well beyond test and development in cloud right now. What we do know that as customers move to cloud, as they invest more in cloud, the likelihood of them changing providers over time is going to diminish. So again, you've got to be ready now with your messaging because customers are going to be making decisions for the long term. We know that it's not a low-touch model. We know that it is a premium model. And we know that the differentiator in this market is going to be around security and it's going to be around customer support. And you absolutely should be marketing those strengths right now to all your customers because they are very much looking for that help and they're looking for their trusted advisor. And we really do believe that the market isn't going to be 5 or 6 large vendors. At the moment, the hosting market is about 26,000 providers when you think about that very long tail of hosters and VARs and SIs, right? This is going to be a long tail market over time. And so how customers are going to differentiate themselves is with messaging, targeting the right customers, and then thinking about how they match what they are strong with against the different customer segments. The road to hybrid is going to be private. Customers are looking for private cloud right now because they don't fully trust the cloud and because they very much want to be able to innovate without risk. And cloud does not change everything, particularly security, right? So while there's a lot of talk about how cloud will disrupt all IT models and all IT practices going forward, it's not going to change security. Everybody is going to have to feel very, very comfortable with what they're seeing with their provider. There's going to need to be a lot of transparency around what happens with security in the hosting model. And if I leave you with just one thing, your customers want to grow their business with cloud. So if you're going to be constantly leading with, we can help you cut costs, you're probably missing the mark with them today. Start leading with how you're going to help your customers innovate their business and grow their business going forward. With that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to have Brett come up and reintroduce the next session. Thank you.